All right, good morning, everyone. We have 1 minute or so, and I'll just come on, as I know I'm always late for time. I'm always struggling to get it done in time, so hopefully we'll have time today. I'm a little tired of being up watching the Olympics last night. I don't know if anybody watched the Olympics or watching them. I'm a little bit of a savage when it comes to the Olympics. I find it the most exciting time every couple of years, and I love the winter's my favorite. So talking about teams though, watching some of the team sports and team events, and I don't know if anyone watches figure skating, but watching Virtue Moyer last night was, or this morning, actually I had to watch it this morning, but as I recorded, it was phenomenal to watch the gold and Cassie Sharp win from an individual perspective. So when you think about teams and some of the things that have to come together in the bobsled, as an example, you look at this picture here I've got on the front, and oh yeah, I get you, Kathy. I know you're a little tired too. And yeah, they did lose, which is really sad. It's been up and down with curling, I have to say. The teams are definitely struggling a little bit here or there. Hopefully they're doing some little reassessment in between.
Spoilers.
What's that? Somebody was just talking there. Oh, sorry, spoiler. Is that what it was? Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry. You can't go on CBC without seeing it blasted across on what's happening. So sorry. Keep an eye. We won't talk about it anymore. But it's phenomenal when you look at teams and how much, when you look at this picture I've got on the front, how critical every little piece is. You know, when you look at the bobsled, which isn't a spoiler because that was night before, bobsled was, they tied after four runs down. They tied to 100th of a second. It's amazing how they have to come together to do all that. So I just wanted to quickly, I was thinking about some of the teams I've worked with over the last year. Just a quick story. There was this one team I worked with. I started out actually coaching the leader, and when you're coaching, you only have so much information. You're getting a one-sided perspective unless you're getting a 360 review of the person. So you're understanding what their perspectives are, what they're trying some different things, but you never really get the other side of the equation. So I worked with this person for a couple of months, and then he was sort of stalling. So I said, well, let me just sit in. So I sat in on one of their meetings, and it was really incredible that, you know, what I saw was not necessarily what I was hearing, because his intentions were great, but the impact he was having wasn't necessarily. So some of the things I tried to think about this morning, some of the things that he did, first of all, he chaired the meeting. He dominated the conversation of the meeting. He shot down some suggestions and said they wouldn't work. So everyone else was pretty much quiet. He asked something was going wrong with a certain area, and he asked what was going wrong and, you know, whose fault it was. So, you know, it certainly wasn't around how we could do things better, and he dominated the conversation. And again, it wasn't truly negative. It was just disengaging. And it was something that teams, you see often in teams. And again, it's not from intent. This person is trying to improve, is trying to do better, is trying to really make a difference. So sometimes you just don't know what it is. So I thought I'd start off, if I can fix my thing here. Here we go. I thought I'd start off with a quick assessment. So I want you to just grab a piece of paper if you can, or you can just do it in your head. That's fine. I just want you to start rating yourself on these. And again, I'm not going to score you as such, but start rating yourself 1 to 10 on some of these things I put up here, and in the current team you're in or the current team you lead. Okay. So team members in this team that you have in your head openly share information and personal information when appropriate. Rate yourself 1 to 10. Okay, next one. Team members have a habit of building on each other's ideas. Number 3, team members address conflict quickly and see it as an opportunity. I want you to start noticing the ones that are super high or super low. Team members align with and follow decision-making standards and have the ability to contribute when appropriate. They know decisions, they know when they're getting made, and they can contribute when appropriate. Missteps or mistakes are seen as opportunities to grow. If you have time later, this would be a great one to do with your team, by the way. Just get them to rate themselves and see what they come up with. Team members capitalize on others' differences and strengths. So it's not conformity. You're capitalizing on differences and strengths of members of the team. I'm getting some background noise there. If you can put it on *6, unless you want to comment. No one dominates the discussion in meetings. Team members are clear about their roles and responsibilities. Team members hold each other accountable and offer support. And finally, the last one, formal use of power by leadership or team member is limited. So whether there's a strong team member or there's a leader of the team, the formal use of power of overriding people, that sort of thing, is limited. So I want you to just take a second now and just look at what you've written down in terms of how you've rated yourself. And I can almost bet there's something in there that isn't super high. And there's hopefully at least one or two that are quite high. And feel free to put in the chat if you're comfortable on any learnings or anything that stands out for you. These are things that I deal with every day when I go into teams, functional teams, I go into teams that just want to be better. These are things I see all the time that are either done really well or need to be better. And rarely do I ever see someone giving themselves top marks on on all these, I should say. So we'll just keep those in mind as we're going through today. So quick little recap on this. So we talked about stages of team development last time. We're not going to go through it all, but the sense of where are you as a team? You're either forming or it's changing or modifying your team. Someone's leaving, someone's coming. You're storming, there's a little conflict going on. What you need to do, you need to get through the storm to be able to get to norming where you're actually doing some work, it's coming together, you seem to be functioning really well, and to the high performing, where everybody is really functioning at a very high level. The leader actually doesn't have a heck of a lot to do, and the leader here, as I said before, could go away for 2 weeks and everything just runs. People can take the lead when required, and then adjourning when sometimes teams finish up. So understanding what that is. So just a little recap there. And in terms of, we got through a couple of these, so very quickly. So the absence of trust. So the absence of trust is one of the top dysfunctions in teams, and it's the baseline for all teams, about being vulnerable with their team. So being able to talk about when you make a mistake, being able to feel comfortable bringing something up that's a differing view, right? Having that trust that you're not going to get your head bitten off. Okay, so it's that vulnerability piece that really plays into that. And secondly, then, if you're not able to open up and be trustful, then how in the world are you ever going to be comfortable bringing up an issue that you have or a conflict that you have, or something that somebody's done that's really offended you? How comfortable are you going to be giving feedback if that's not the case? So fear of conflict, it's artificial harmony. People sort of are walking on eggshells sometimes in teams. And then we talked a little bit about the conflict management styles, and we walked through competition. This is where we ended up: competition, accommodation, and avoidance. Just quickly in a recap there around competition, you could very much be in a state where this is wrong, this can't be done. I mean, you guys work in very monitored and standardized industry, so there's things that are wrong and inappropriate and unethical. So, if something happens and you put your foot down, say, I'm right in here, what you're doing is wrong. That's when you could be a little competitive, very comfortably be so. That's when conflict in that way, and you're right and they're wrong, is actually appropriate. Accommodation, when someone else is so concerned for others, is really high. So you're like, maybe it's a new person to the team and you're giving them something that you would have not necessarily done, but hey, let's give it to them. Let them give it a try. They're only new to the team. Maybe it's something where it's not a big thing for you, but it's a really big thing for someone else. It means something really important to them. Avoidance, again, some people, it's funny, there's an assessment that goes along with this I do with teams, and you'd be amazed how many people in the world come in as their top style is avoidance. They just walk away. And as Canadians, we are not known for confronting conflict head on. So it's very common, and understanding there is a place for it though. Maybe you're new to a team and you just kind of go, okay, hold on now, maybe not, this isn't the time to actually bring this up. Maybe I got to really listen a little longer or understand a bit more before I do. Doesn't mean you won't eventually bring something up. Then you've got compromise and collaborate. So compromise is sort of, the typical negotiating, you give up something, I'll give up something, you get something, I get something approach. And collaboration when you actually work together. So that's understanding the needs of others. Won't get into all this because we're not doing the whole section on conflict, but and collaboration isn't always the best thing. Everyone thinks, oh, you got to have it so everybody wins. That's not always the most appropriate. So that's the key here. I want you to know that all of those you should be able to do, and all of those you should be able to recognize when they're appropriate, okay? In terms of dealing with conflict, I'm just going to put these up because I've got quite a few slides. I'm not going to get through them all. Understanding when you're dealing with conflict, and a lot of us deal with it every day, whether it's with a client, a colleague, one of the companies, whoever it is. One of the key ones there, is understanding, when things aren't working, maybe I got to think about what's my role in this. What do I need to change? But also, one key thing here is the relationship. So how important is that relationship? If this is a fly-by-night person that you're talking to, that you're never going to talk to again, you're at a conference and you meet this person and they live in California and you're never going to meet them again, then maybe you could have a really robust conversation that could be quite edgy, or you might tick someone off a little bit, or they might tick you off a little bit, but does it really matter because you're never going to see them again? One of the key things for the people that we work with or our clients is about looking at the relationship as the priority. Is this something where, am I going to go to the competitive state and make I'm right, you're wrong? That is going to impact the relationship. It's got to be worth it. So you have to think about that. Looking at their needs and interests, what is it they want to get out of it so we can both win? Talking to someone this morning who's actually in the middle of negotiations, union negotiations, and that's the whole point. Is how do you figure out what the other side really needs and see what you need, and maybe you can both win. Maybe it's not the same thing, right? Keep people and problems separate. Listening, and listening. Being curious about what's happening. So really, really be curious. When someone's getting you irritated, what's that about? It's about you. It's about you getting irritated. So what's that all about? Listen to it, be curious about what's going on and why they're presenting a certain way. Ask questions, understand your triggers when you're triggered. So when you get that anxious feeling, when you feel it in your gut, in your stomach, or wherever it is, for me it's my stomach, when someone really gets me angry, I can feel it. But I know that's all about me, so I got to think about, is this a time that I need to explode, or is this a time where I have to walk away? Because this is about me getting angry. It's not about them making me angry. Despite what my 8-year-old says, I make her angry all the time. Understand your role and responsibilities. So what piece do you play? So this is what I see when I work with teams that are healthier than others, because they're not all perfectly healthy. There's always something going on in the team. They have lively, interesting meetings. They do. You go in and it's interesting. Most people are contributing. Obviously, extroverts probably a little bit more than introverts, but people are drawn on for their expertise. There's definitely a sense of let's make this better. Let's put it out there. And whatever I say isn't going to be slapped back in my face. Okay, so it's lively and interesting, and it's not just one person. They get all the ideas, all the people at the table. So if there's somebody who's quiet, say an expert you've got in the corner who's really introverted and really quiet, so noticing, and so people saying, so Brian, what do you think of that? Or Brad or Mary. So what do you think of that now? Because that's sort of your space. What would you recommend here? Pulling them out, but that's naturally done by members of the team. They look at problems and they solve them quickly, right? People are on the same path. They understand their decision making, and they talk about the critical stuff. The elephants in the room are put on the table. It's a big table, obviously, for an elephant, but there's some big elephants out there in teams. When I work with them, sometimes people end up getting really upset or uptight because it's been going on for a long time. If you put stuff out on the table and you become more comfortable doing that, then obviously, I know it's great in theory, it's difficult to do in practice, but it means that you can actually have that put out there, and it's not as big a deal when you bring it up. And politics. So if you're open, you're trusting, you're putting conflict out there, all that's happening, you're minimizing the conflict, the politics in the room. So who's who and the whole power struggles and things, you definitely don't see that as much in these high-performing teams. So what do you do as a leader? So as a leader, you've got to recognize that conflict is a positive thing. So the thing about conflict, one thing I often find is people come and say, oh, there's 2 members of my team that just are not getting along, right? Most people will let that go on longer than they should. The other type of folk will actually step in when they shouldn't. So a healthy conflict could mean, yeah, you could have two people that disagree in a meeting, and it maybe gets a little heated. That's okay, we're human. So do they sort it out on their own? Like when my kids have it out, I say, no, you sort it out with your sister. I'll give them a certain period of time before it elevates so where I have to step in. But there's that fine balance between when you step in. Most people, though, I'll be very honest, don't step in early enough, and it becomes more of a toxic environment where it can't be fixed or it's really tough to fix. So if you're in a discussion, you're in there, so you can ask a question to fan the flames. So yeah, we're doing that again this year. Okay, fair enough. So when we're going to put that package together, we're going to promote this sort of new service offering or whatever. Why do we do it that way? What could we do a little differently? What can we do differently here, guys? Like, why do we do it that way anyway, right? Having sort of something to sort of start a conversation into a different path. So to get some conflict going, get some people to disagree on stuff and hopefully work themselves into something better. Because when you stay the standalone, let's just keep doing things the same way. So when you look at change, you got to fan the flames a little bit, and it obviously in a controlled environment. So demand debate, which I call dialogue, the and versus the but. So I'm adding to what you say. So if you say something and you say, oh, well, that's not going to, this market isn't going to go for that, or that market isn't going to go for that, or this is a new risk that we've got to deal with, or new legislation that's changed. So how do you add to what I'm saying as opposed to doing a but? So how do you say, that's a good point. And if we want to take that into consideration, we also have to consider this. So it's an and. I mean, notice how many times you say but in the span of a meeting. Seriously, it's amazing. So how many people they get on opposite sides where they can actually be on the same side and have an and keep adding to it like a snowball. It keeps getting bigger and bigger and becomes a snowman. And obviously you have to model the right behavior. So if you look at lack of commitment, so if you're not trusting, you have fear of conflict, then what's the likelihood that you're going to buy into something? What is the likelihood that you're actually going to buy into something? So I haven't aired my opinions. I don't feel comfortable going up against yours. I really don't agree with what's happening. I might say I buy in, but I really don't. We all know those people that keep their mouths shut and just smile and nod, right? So oftentimes that will lead to a fake commitment. And it also has an element of ambiguity to it. So who's really committed, who really isn't committed? I love this one. I always remember the distinction between the contribution and commitment. The matter of bacon and eggs. The chicken makes a contribution, adds a little piece, but the pig makes a commitment. So commitment really means buying in. Doesn't mean you agree with everything to start, but it means you buy into the end result. So two things in teams: clarity. So you have to understand what you're buying into. You understand your role and what that means. Say a project or something that you're doing this year, or even your regular job. Like, what do I do? How do I buy into the way we're doing things, or how do I buy into this new project or this new approach that we're taking? So how do you actually make that happen? Now with commitment, you get a lot of challenges. I worked with a company many years ago that had to have consensus on everything. It was incredibly slow moving, and some things didn't actually, I'm just gonna put these up on the screen. Some things actually did not actually get done. The potential that was lost was extraordinary. You don't always need to have consensus on everything. So when I go into a meeting, if I feel like I've aired out my concerns, I feel like I've said some things, we pulled it from all of the room, okay? As a leader in a team, so say I'm in a team of leaders. If you guys are leaders and you're in a team of leaders, or if you're a colleague in a team with a leader, you can all agree to disagree on certain things. But at the end of the day, there has to be an approach of moving forward. Right? So in other words, do you need consensus? No. Is that appropriate for everyone at the table to agree? No. Do they need to have their opinions aired? Yes. Do they need to have an understanding of why? Hopefully they understand why a decision is getting made. Need for certainty. Is it uncertain? Can you make a decision without certainty? Absolutely. If you're airing things out, you're looking at it from a perspective. You guys live in risk mitigation. Like, how do you actually minimize risk? But sometimes you don't know. Maybe you've got a competitor that is starting a new approach or service offering, or going after a different industry they haven't before. You have to make decisions on how you're going to change and adapt. So you don't necessarily know the answer. You don't necessarily know. You could wait forever to make a decision. Oh, maybe we should wait another few months and see. There's a risk to that, and understanding that if you don't make a decision and if you waffle on it, other things can happen. And when you see teams that can't make decisions, it ripples down through the organization or ripples out to the organization. So if the leadership team or a team leader cannot make a decision, it will impact. So what's a small little gap in that team will become a huge gaping hole in the organization in terms of how people feel about it, understanding how they're connected to the organization, how engaged they are. They're going to say, well, they can't make decisions anyway. Everything's same old, same old. Fear of failure, obviously, and lack of communication, which we talked about. Very quickly, so commitment, you're looking at what are we committing to, right? Who's doing what? When are they doing it? How's it working? Right? So at the end of a meeting, when you're talking about a new project or even your general meetings, are you actually confirming everyone understands what it means? Do we know that we all disagree, but hey, here's the decision. We know we all have to buy into that and we have to commit to that because it's going to impact us. It's not going to work unless we all commit. So we can disagree and commit. Absolutely. It happens every day. There's lots of push down from large organizations, for example. You'll have out of a different country even and a push down. And yeah, we didn't necessarily agree with everything for our geography, but at the end of the day, we had to buy into it. Holding people, deadlines. Yeah, let's do that. And all of a sudden the next meeting goes by or something else happens on the team and all of a sudden, oh, weren't we supposed to have that done by now? So deadlines are important because if I'm committing myself to something and so has got it dragging on and on and on, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. And worst case scenario, this is a really good one. If you're finding you're stuck and people are not committing, sometimes it's fear. Sometimes we're human. It's fear. So what you can do is actually go through a what if exercise. Well, let's go to the worst case scenario. And I do it in coaching all the time. So what if this happens? Okay, so what if that happens? And you walk down that path, okay, worst case scenario, we lose this client, or worst case scenario, this happens. Prime one would be you're making a commitment to work differently with a huge client. Maybe the huge client you don't make a lot of money on anyway. Maybe they're sort of they're using up all your resources. So what if we lose them? How do we fill that gap? Well, okay, fair enough. We lose that person. That means we get, wow, think of all the extra time we have to find a new client. Yeah, it's the worst case scenario, but this is what we could get out of it. So all of a sudden you've got lack of buy-in. And then what are the chances if you're not bought into, you haven't been heard, you don't trust your team, you're going to actually hold the members of the team accountable. You're actually going to have accountability within the team. Very, very unlikely. Okay, so it ends up being low standards, things don't get done. This I see all the time. There's very few organizations I've ever worked with that actually hold people accountable. Yes, it's performance management. Yes, there's some things that happen, but do they actually hold each other accountable? Very unlikely. So the willingness of team members to call their peers on performance of behaviors that might hurt the team. So if I see someone doing something that's not appropriate or they're falling behind or something's happening, how do I nicely go up and say, hey, I know I don't know, are you going to be able to get that done? Or you're a little, that's a little behind now. That's going to impact my work. Can I help you on that? Or can you speed things up? Or, calling them out when things aren't getting done or to the level that they should be getting done. So when they're truly accountable though, poor performers, and again, when you think about it, we've all struggled in jobs. There's been jobs that we've had where there's elements where we've struggled. If we had someone come up to us and hold us accountable to that, but also offer support, it could be extremely helpful. Okay, so you would notice problems are quickly. What I see when I go in often is truly accountable teams get things done quickly. So think big problems, which are small, don't become big icebergs. Okay, they have these little burgy bits. Say that from a Newfoundland perspective. See lots of icebergs, little burgy bits floating around you, and they nip those in the bud. They go out and say, okay, this is a problem. Let's get this fixed. Let's move on. There's respect, and there's not a lot of performance management. Sort of, it's done inherently. The ultimate dysfunction, though, in a team is about caring from something other than the group. We've all been there. Who knows somebody? Who doesn't know somebody? Let me know. You've been in a team where there's somebody who isn't looking out for themselves. Okay, it happens quite often. We have to hold people accountable to that. So, but think about it. If you haven't got anything else below it, why in the world would you think about everyone else? So if you're actually bought into, if you feel trusted in a team, you're bringing things out, you're dealing with conflict when needed, you're committed, you're buying in, you don't love everything all the time, but you're committed to the team, you're holding each other accountable, then chances are very high that you're going to be a team that's going to look out for each other. Okay, so those are the functions of a team. So let's talk about, I want to have a few minutes here to talk about ground rules as well. So I threw in something on psychological safety as well, and let me know if anyone's ever heard of it. In terms of leadership, you've got elements of how do you actually create. There's so many books. There's probably, I would say, thousands of books over the years on teams. Okay, so same thing with leadership. There's so much out there. What are some sort of tried and true things? So with leadership, you've got to have a vision and you've got to have common goals. And you've got to maintain focus on those goals. You got to capitalize on the skills of your team. There, again, diversity of team, right? What strengths are there? If you all have the same job on the team, maybe some people are better at some things than others. How do you maximize that? Their differences. How do you promote a positive view of growth through change, right? So we're going to move on. The relationship. So we're going to talk about norms in a minute. So how do you model and promote quality communication? Conflict resolution is the one thing we don't do. And as leaders, we have to start doing that. Recognizing and rewarding accomplishments, ensuring the team has operating principles. So people come in, you're integrating people into this team. I don't know if anyone's ever had this happen. You go into a team, a new job. You go in and you don't have a clue what's going on. There's nothing written down. You don't know what the heck's going on. There's no sense of understanding around, okay, so what's normal here? Where I worked before, we did this. So you go in doing that, and all of a sudden, you're like, people are looking at you funny, or like not giving you the cold shoulder, right? Understanding how to bring people in and how do you evaluate yourself as a team. At the end of a team meeting, do you ever say, so how did this meeting go? What could we do better next time? I suggest that to you. Give it a try. Another thing is psychological safety. So psychological safety is something that's becoming more common. A lot of people, many of you probably work with people in the insurance industry, clients in the insurance, sorry, in the construction industry, being in the insurance world. So, okay, not quite sure what that was. Can you guys still hear me? Just somebody say yes on the call if you can. Okay, perfect, thanks. All right, so when you think of psychological safety, safety is a big word, right? It's now gone, if you look at occupational health and safety, it's elevated to mental safety as well. So I actually read an article just recently around psychological safety, but and one of the things, I'm just going to read a quick thing. It's from Paul Santagata. He's head of industry at Google. And I'm just going to read just a quick thing here. It says, he knows the results of the tech giant's massive 2-year study on team performance, which revealed that the highest performing teams have one thing in common: psychological safety, the belief that you won't be punished when you make a mistake. Studies show that psychological safety allows for moderate risk-taking, speaking your mind, creativity, and sticking your neck out without fear of having it cut off. Just the type of behaviors that lead to market breaks or lead to market breakthroughs. Psychological safety is critical from just a health perspective, but it's a good way of thinking about it. Do people feel safe in your workplace? And if anybody wants the article, I can certainly post it up afterward. But it's all around, what does it mean in your world? Do people feel safe coming to work, speaking their mind, being creative, doing something a little different? So it might be a little fun way, if people are used to the word safety, using that terminology. Now, ground rules. I'm so glad we have time to get through this. Ground rules are essentially agreements in a workplace. So the difference between norms and ground rules, I'll explain in a minute. Ground rules you set in a team. I'm going to give you some examples of what that would look like. Whenever I work with teams, every single time I work with teams, we set ground rules. We set ground rules for the session we're going to have. We set ground rules of how we're going to work together through whatever period of time. But then they set ground rules on what they do as a team, because what one team might set may be different than another. So in terms of norms, though, I want you in the chat, or feel free to speak up if you like, what's the expected standard of behavior? So how would you expect people to behave in this situation in an elevator? What do people do? Somebody type it in for me. They look up. Yes, they look up at what floor they're on. I had to laugh though. Actually, I did this. You'll laugh. I used this, not this slide or anything, but I used the concept years ago in Toronto, 4 or 5 years ago, and I asked them, so what do you do in an elevator? And they said, you look around. But I don't know, being Atlantic Canadians, sometimes you actually talk to people. So the norm of behavior, I would think, in Atlantic Canada might be a little bit different than it is elsewhere. So, you know, I'd go in elevators in Toronto and talk to people about the weather or something, which is standard for us. I learned pretty quickly that that's not the way things are done in Toronto. So here's another one. What would you do at a fast food restaurant? Or what would you not do at a fast food restaurant? Eat and talk? What would you not do? Think about if you're at a fancy restaurant versus a fast food restaurant. Eat and talk. Yes, you're eating and talking. That is definitely one thing for sure. You're actually eating and talking, and probably, like, you know, talking while your mouth is full, have your hand over, you're doing everything quickly. It's not relaxed. It's probably louder. It's probably a loud environment. The expectation's a little bit different when you're there. So if you're at some fancy restaurant, the expectation of how someone's going to behave is going to be different. Okay, so a missile control center. I love the red button. I found one with the red button. I wanted one with the red button. So, you know, needless to say, what are you going to do there? Yes, quiet, controls, good judgment. Yeah, you're focused. You know, you're not going to be probably, you know, putting up with anything from a distraction perspective. I've talked to people in control rooms and things before where if the head of the organization comes to the door and they're busy, they just ignore him or her. So, you know, it's absolutely a different environment. So the norm there, if you're going to go work in that environment, is going to be very different. Okay, so those are norms. They're often industry. If I'm talking to somebody in my world who says, I really want to get into the insurance industry, there are norms. Oh, not hit the red button. Yes, yeah, don't hit the red button, which is why I picked this one with the button. If you want to go in the insurance industry, you know, hey, if you have fun with it, just send me something you think is in your industry. I mean, I have certain things I would say about the insurance industry. For example, I've had people coming from very different environments who want to go in the insurance industry. And again, there's lots of opportunity in the insurance industry. There's lots of different types of jobs. I mean, it's incredible. The opportunity is immense. And I really believe that. But the norms of how you behave are a little bit different than some industries. So, you know, again, it's a norm. It's not necessarily a ground rule, because I could go into one organization in 5 teams, and those different teams are going to have different ground rules. Can anyone think of a ground rule that they've had with their teams or in any team? Anyone send me something there or type it out? And it's definitely background noise too, if anyone can put it on mute there. Somebody give me a ground rule, something they don't do or they do. Start on time. Yes, thank you for that, Lois. Starting on time is absolutely a ground rule. If that's something that you do, some people don't. Some organizations will say, no, until the leader's here, we could wait 10, 15 minutes, we're not starting, or until everyone's here. But absolutely, stay on topic, start on time. What does that look like? There's so many things. If you're going to do anything after this session, think about with your teams, talking about your ground rules. None of them are absolute, and they should always be reviewed over time. So if you set ground rules, what I do with teams is that I say, okay, let's talk about them. What do we agree to? It's like negotiating. What do we agree to in terms of, for example, attendance? Like you said, if you're starting on time, well, what if everyone's not there, right? What happens if you're late? Interruptions. So what do you do with your phones? Are you allowed to look at your phone? Or you're not allowed to look at your phone, right? What about conflict? How do we deal with conflict on the team? Is everything confidential? Is it sort of what's in the room stays in the room? Again, none of those are right or wrong. You have to decide as a team what they look like. Decision making. One of the biggest things here is you always keep going back to your ground rules. Okay, it's been 6 months, guys. Let's pull out our ground rules. Are we adhering to them? What are we not doing? What are we doing? Chronic violations. It has to be an understanding against the team. We have to hold each other accountable. So if we say attendance and all of a sudden the leader isn't there for a number of times, yeah, theoretically, you hold the leader accountable per our ground rules, Mr. or Mrs. Leader. Ms. Leader, we have to hold you accountable because you haven't been there, right, to our meetings that are really important. So what happens? Do we give feedback when people violate the ground rules? What do you agree on when people violate them? Is it chronic violations? Is it every time, right? There's an element of forgiveness there as well. So again, I'm not going to ask you these as such, but these are things I ask teams. So what pitfalls will you have individually as a team? So what's going to hold you back from adhering to those ground rules, and how can you get past it? This one here, I would love if you could take away a little piece from here to think about. Maybe ask your teams even. How many times have passed where you know the real issues are not being discussed? You know, what are the real issues we are not discussing? What's the emotional economic cost of not tackling those issues? And think about this right now. I'm not going to make you say it as such, but what are the top 1 or 2 conversations we're not having on our team? And let me tell you, if you think it, everyone else thinks it too. Okay? What's stopping you? You're probably not doing it from a fear perspective. It's a human natural trait. As leaders, as members of teams, we have a responsibility to bring these things up. Okay? So what has to shift, but also what's the first step? It could simply be, we're going to talk ground rules. Ground rules are a great way, actually, if you want to start talking about this stuff with your teams, to say, for people to bring up things like, oh, I think we should make sure we start on time. I.e., it's been really ticking me off probably that people are late and I'm sitting there waiting for everything to happen for 15 minutes, a complete waste of my time. That's harder to say than say, I think we should have a ground rule for being on time. So sometimes they're a great first step. Now, and time-wise, we're right on the money, I think, there now. So generations-wise, again, that's almost a whole thing in itself. Just to keep in mind, the generations are a big issue. They want inclusiveness in teams. They want to be part of a team. They want to contribute to a team. They want feedback from a team. So understanding how you include them is critical. It's not like, I'm 48. It's not like when it was when I was younger. It's not, for any of you that are my age, or if you're 20s, you understand what I'm saying. If not, you have to start understanding that about those generations. And again, that's a whole topic in itself. So I want you to take away one thing at least from the session. So again, teams, it's a huge topic, but is there something that kind of, you know, the light bulb went off, or yeah, we really start needing to do, we need to do that, or an understanding of what you need to do differently? If you could put it in the chat for me, that would be great. It could just be to me. And start doing something this week. Think of something that you can do differently in your team or propose to your team. And again, if anybody wants that article, you can certainly put a note in the chat as well. So thank you. I am actually close on time for the first time ever. I'll talk to you guys next month, and Carrie will be sending out some information on that. And I think she posts these as well, the recordings as well. So thank you very much. Oh, thanks, Mary. I appreciate that. I got your note there, and holding people accountable. So set ground rules. Love it. Love it. Yeah, I'll try to put a link in there now to the article if I can find it, if you want to hang on. Otherwise, thank you all very much. See you next time, and I really appreciate your contributions. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.